Hey, what's up? Today we're going to be looking at some SAT questions. The hardest ones from this SAT Practice 8 I took recently. I got 53 answers out of 54, so I think I'm better at reading than at math. But we're going to be going through the explanations of the hardest questions in this SAT, including the question I got wrong. This one. Alright. So, the hardest questions are always on the second section. This one. Let's start with this one because this one was really tough. So, we have that in a study of the evolution of DPTA. Okay, let's not go that far yet. So, we have a graph, right? As you can see, we have a graph. So, it's one of those. It's one of those information ideas questions. We have the title of the graph. It says the average, right? So the average number of survival of fruit flies. Fruit flies is just a type of flies, right? Following infections. So this is the average number of how many flies survived the infection, right? That makes sense. Then we have the survival rate of percentage alive, the percentage of fruit flies that were alive after days after infection, after 2 days, 6 days, 10 days, 14 days. So right away we can see that there are two types of flies, the circle one and the square one, type B and type AB, that die. They all died. They all went dying slowly. They were alive. 100% were all 100% were alive on the first day, of course, and then 2 days after they started dying, and then they just plummeted to death to 40%, and then until there was nothing left, right, at 0% after 14 days. But there was one type of fly, fruit flies, type A, that survived. They died a bit, yeah, they went from 100 to 90, but nothing compared to the other two types of fruit flies. Right, so we see that. Now let's take a look at the text. It says, in a study of the evolution of DPTA and DPTB. Alright, so the evolution, right? It's how something evolves. Something evolves, so something goes from 1 to 10. So they were studying, I forgot to draw the 10. By the way, how does that look? Looks good. Alright, so 1 to 10. That's evolution, right? The concept definition of evolution. They were studying the evolution of both DPTA and DPTB. Now, DPTA, DPTB, what are these things? They are genes. Okay, so DPTA and DPTB are genes that combat bacteria or pathogens. I guess that's similar to bacteria, and they also foster beneficial microbes in fruit flies. So what this part of the text says, very scientific, but it basically says that both DPTA and DPTB both of them combat. This is a sword. Well, let's make a pistol instead. Both of them combat bacteria, right? This is bacteria. Both of them combat bacteria, which means they fight it. And that's not the only thing they do. They also foster beneficial microbes, which means they make the fruit flies healthier, right? So they also make them healthier. So we know that those two genes do that to the fruit flies. Now, researchers assessed DM. Whenever you see names like these, Drosophila melanogaster, just abbreviate them with the first letter of the name, right? So DM. Just read it as DM. Resistance, so they assessed basically tested how resistant they assessed the resistance of DM to pathogenic. Researchers assessed DM resistance to pathogenic infections by PRNAS. By the way, I just realized, so when we mention fruit flies in here, right after that we have in parentheses Drosophila, the scientific name for the fruit flies. So this tells us that Drosophila melanogaster, or DM, is just the scientific name for fruit flies. And so it's saying that researchers assessed the resistance to bacteria or pathogenic infections by PR. So PR is something that causes an infection, and AS is something that causes an infection. Actually, it says they're bacteria that are common in the flies' environments, right? So they were assessing whether fruit flies were resistant to these common bacteria. Subjects, the fruit flies, that's what they call what you're gonna experiment with, right? You call it what the scientists, whenever they're going to experiment with something, they call it subject. So their subjects were fruit flies, or DM. Their subjects included flies identified by mutations silencing DPTA, DPTB, or both DPTA and DPTB. What's this saying? This is saying that the flies they were assessing were mutated, which means they were modified to silence, it says here, silencing DPTA, DPTB, or both DPTA and DPTB. So there were some fruit flies. So all the fly, a regular fly that does not have mutations has both DPTA and DPTB, I believe. But these were mutated, right, for the experiment. So there were some fruit flies that didn't have DPTA. There were some other fruit flies that didn't have DPTB, and there were fruit flies that didn't have any. Termed types A. So this is very important. You have to follow from here to here. If it says that it silenced DPTA, type A, right, because it's the first option here, and this is the first option, means this matches this part. So this tells us that fruit flies that were silenced, their DPTA gene, are called type A. Right, so type A fruit flies don't have DPTA, right, because the gene was silenced. Then it says, I'm back now. So if type B matches the second option here, DPTB. So type B doesn't have DPTA gene because it's DPTB gene because it's silencing it. And type AB, look at the third option here and the third option here, is silencing both DPTB and DPTA, so it doesn't have any genes. Now it says in conjunction, like together with the observation that resistance to P. reitgeri, that's one of the bacteria, correlates with DPTA activity, but is not significantly affected by DPTB activity. Okay, so this is saying that resistance to P. reitgeri correlates with DPTA, but not with DPTB. This is saying that if a fruit fly has the gene DPTA, it can be resistant to the bacteria PR. But DPTB doesn't help resist that bacteria. It's mainly the DPTA that helps with that bacteria. So data in the graph of survival post rates, this graph up here, post AS infection. Alright, so this is saying that after so it's giving us the first fact that's saying, P. red Gary needs DPTA, or fruit flies need DPTA to be resistant to PR. And then it's saying, for the graph is showing the infection not of P. red Gary, but it's showing the infection of AS, however this is pronounced. AS is the infection on the graph. It suggests that, so let's look at what's happening. But I'm already guessing, if this is saying that P. red Gary needed DPTA, it's possibly going to say that the opposite for AS, right? AS is going to say flights need DP2B, not DPTA to survive. So let's see. So we have type A flies. Type A flies, remember, type A flies are being silenced their A gene. So those are the ones that survive. So if they don't have DPTA, right, because it's being silenced in the type A, which is one with the triangle, that means they have DPTB, which means DPTB helps them survive. Unlike the square one, which is type AB, which means they don't have DPTA or DPTB, then in that case they die because they need DPTB to survive. We can clearly see with the triangle. Type B is silencing the DPTB gene and it's only keeping the DPTA gene. But as we can see, keeping the DPTA gene might work for P. red Gary, but it doesn't work for AS because they die. So we have to find an answer here that completes the text saying that DPTB helps flies survive the AS infection. Let's see, this one has AS. DPTA confers, which means provides defense against AS regardless of the presence of DPTB. That's of course not true. You need the presence of DPTB to survive, and type A shows that. The ones that only had DPTA died. Option D, DPTB may have developed as a specific defense against AS. Yeah, DPTB is a specific defense against AS because they survive. That's it. That's the answer. Option B says DPTB protects against only one bacteria species. Well, it's protecting against this one, where DPTA protects against multiple species. Whenever we only talk about 2 species, we never talk about more than that, so we can't really say that it protects against multiple species. Defense against AS is strongest when both DPTA and DPTB are present. No, they die. Type AB flies die. So option D, DPTB helps the fruit fly survive. That's the answer, option C.